Howdy, I'm looking forward to talking about mergers and acquisitions this week. Let's go ahead and get started here. I want to start this discussion off actually with a discussion about a company that you're probably mostly familiar with, Costco. So Costco has been selling rotisserie chickens for about $5 for a long time. And think about this for a minute, why they would do that. So these chickens are put in the back of the store to get people to walk through the whole store. And they've kept that price at about $5 since 2009. They've even kept their prices low when others went higher. It's interesting here, $30 to $40 million a year on gross margin is lost. They essentially are losing $30 to $40 million a year by keeping the price at $4.99. But they said that is what we do for a living because it is a strategic imperative for them to keep those chickens at that price in the back of the store. So with this challenge, I want to go through some considerations here. So for one, about almost 2/3 of the US poultry market is controlled by just 5 stores. So, or 5 companies. So think about what that really does to a supply chain. That puts those companies in a strong position. The majority of the supply chain are large companies that have the bargaining power with a company like Costco. So furthermore, look at some changes that have happened in the poultry industry. Chickens are getting bigger, they're getting bigger faster. There's more and more money available in larger birds. So Costco needs 6-pound birds to fit in its roasters. We couldn't take a 7-pound bird or an 8-pound bird and make it work. They're too big. They wouldn't even fit on our rotisserie line. So this turns out to be a challenge. The companies that Costco is buying from want to provide, or want to sell chickens that are bigger. Costco doesn't need those. So what can they do? Ultimately, they decided to partner with some Nebraska farmers. Breeders and egg layers provide, and hatcheries provide the chicks. Those go to the growers. Most of these growers have been in corn and soybeans, so Costco has to train them. The farmers have to pay the money for the barns, and large companies will provide chicks and feed. Once all of this is done, the chickens themselves go to a processing plant, almost 1,000 jobs being provided there. And about 100 million chickens can be processed a year, providing about 40% of Costco's national needs. The focus here being primarily on the Western stores. The interesting thing that I see here is that they expect through this process, through creating their own supply chain, a savings up to 35 cents per bird. Times that by 100 million chickens, and you've made up that $30 to $40 million of loss that Costco was taking, but they're able to do it by essentially becoming their own supplier. Now, if you're going to become your own supplier, there are other ways to do that. So this is an example of a Brazilian coffee company that purchased this other Café Passembu, purchased this company particularly because they wanted the production facility as part of the agreement. They could become their own supplier through an acquisition rather than building it themselves. So mergers, acquisitions, and takeovers. What are they? What are the differences? So a merger is when 2 firms come together on a relatively co-equal basis to create a new, larger company. An acquisition is where one firm buys a controlling or 100% potentially interest in another firm with the intent of making it part of its subsidiary business, making it part of its own portfolio. And a takeover is very similar to an acquisition, but basically the target firm did not solicit the acquiring firm's bid for outright ownership. This is generally done by firms that are purchasing stock and ultimately buy enough to take control over a company. So research shows that shareholders of acquired firms often earn above average returns from acquisitions. Shareholders of the acquiring firms typically earn returns that are close to zero. Sometimes they even lose money when the company they've invested in engages in an acquisition. And the acquiring firm's stock often falls immediately after that transition is announced. There's a lot of risk taken, and part of the difficulty here is that determining the worth of a target firm is difficult. This difficulty increases the likelihood that a firm will have to pay a premium to acquire a target. They might end up paying too much relative to what it's worth. And that's why the stock price may go down and the shareholders may not actually make much at all. I want to give you an example of an acquisition and kind of see this a little bit more in play. So Novartis is a pharmaceutical company. They were to buy a cancer drug maker called Endocyte for about $2 billion. You'll see here the stock price of Novartis as it has kind of gone up over time. And then if you look here and compare that to the top being Novartis, the bottom being Endocyte, where it kind of just sat there. You can kind of see where there's some jumps, maybe some rumors got out, but ultimately then Endocyte doesn't change a whole lot until the announcement is made. And as soon as that announcement is made, their stock price jumps from about $16 to about $24. Not bad if you happen to buy Endocyte the day before. So we're going to come back to this example, but for your first question, I want you to identify 2 examples of a merger or acquisition in the past 5 years. As soon as you're done with that, we'll go ahead and move on to the next part.